and chair of Equal Pay Coalition, New York City, then Brianna, and then, of course, we'll answer questions. We're incredibly excited, Governor, to be here and tell you about all our progress and where we are. So with that, I'm going to just shoot. You guys want to, 5 seconds, introduce yourselves?
I'm Kelly Owens, Vice President of Government Relations for Family Planning Advocates.
Tracy Brooks, President and CEO of Family Planning Advocates.
Brianna, I'm here to talk about human trafficking.
We have Neufeld, Equal Pay Coalition of New York City, and the New York Women's Agenda.
Andrea Miller, President, NARAL Pro-Choice New York.
Susie Ballantyne, New York State AFL-CIO.
Jim Alatris, I work for Governor Cuomo.
Mylan.
I'm Andrew Cuomo. I do what Mylan tells me to do.
Yay! That's the highlight today. Take note. Please report that.
Betsy Ball, I work for Governor Cuomo.
Alfonso David, I work for Governor Cuomo.
Sarah Weddington, winning attorney, Roe versus Wade.
I'm Dina Bax, founder and president of A Better Balance.
Barbara Bartoletti, I'm Legislative Director for the New York State League of Women Voters.
John Mallon, President and CEO of Planned Parenthood of New York City.
Christine Sadowski, representing YWCA's New York State.
Donna Lieberman, Executive Director, New York Civil Liberties Union.
Sabrina Shulman, Vice President, NARAL Pro-Choice New York.
Okay, let's begin. Today, we will be sending up the Governor's Women's Equality Act, a 10-point agenda that is going to help address inequality, as the Governor has said repeatedly, and I'm sure he'll say again, discrimination is alive and well, and this bill is going to bring us closer to that. Keep going. Keep going. You know, New York has such a rich tradition. In 1848, the women's suffrage movement began here, and the first Women's Rights Convention was in Seneca Falls. And of course, in 1969, the Stonewall Riots began, gay rights movement that swept across the nation. And as you all know, in 2011, New York became the largest state in the United States to pass marriage equality. And the rest of the nation followed. But we have so much more to do. We all know we have not reached full equality in our society. The facts are startling. A woman will earn, on average, $11,000 less per year and $500,000 less over a lifetime than a man. A woman is 32 times less likely to become a CEO or serve on a corporation board than a man. A woman is 5 times more likely to be sexually harassed or become a victim of domestic violence than a man. A woman is more than twice as likely to be a victim of housing or lending discrimination than a man. A woman is twice as likely to be a single parent in poverty than a man. And it just goes on and on and on. A woman is twice as likely to live out old age in poverty than a man. And today, we're going to take steps to correct that with the 10-point Women's Equality Act. Point 1, we're shattering the glass ceiling and we're going to achieve pay equity. Point 2, we're going to stop sexual harassment in every single workplace in this state. Point 3, we're going to remove barriers that prevent people from remedying discrimination, women. Point 4, we're going to end familial status discrimination in employment. Point 5, we're going to stop housing discrimination for domestic violence victims. Point 6, we're going to stop source of income discrimination. Point 7, we're going to protect victims of domestic violence by strengthening our orders of protection laws. Point 8, we're going to strengthen our human trafficking laws to prevent anybody like Brianna from ever being trafficked again. Point 9, we're going to stop pregnancy discrimination. And point 10, we're going to protect a woman's freedom of choice. I'm not going to go and read off of every slide because I think many of you know all of this, but as we said, we're going to achieve pay equity because women don't earn what men do. Next one. The Women's Equality Act for shattering the glass ceiling and achieving pay equity is going to close the any other factor than sex loophole by requiring employers to show a real reason for pay disparities. And it's going to protect an employee's right to inquire about wage disparities of another employee so that they're not fired if they get that information. And we're going to award increased damages to successful plaintiffs in pay equity cases. That's what this bill will do. With respect to stopping sexual harassment, the facts are startling. In 2011, women accounted for 75% of all sexual harassment complaints filed with the division, 83% with EEOC. Currently, New York law only prohibits sexual harassment for employers with more than four or more employees, even though 60% of our workplaces in our state have less than 4 employees. So we're going to just eliminate that. We don't think sexual harassment should occur in any workplace, period, no matter how big or how small the employer is. Keep going. 3. We're going to remove barriers to remedying discrimination. Approximately 77% of sex-based employment discrimination cases are filed with New York State are filed by women. Currently, plaintiffs cannot recover attorney's fees at trial for discrimination cases, even if they prevail. It makes it very difficult to bring these cases, and these cases are tough for people to bring to begin with because they have a lot of consequences. So the Women's Equality Act would permit a judge to order attorney's fees in cases where they deem it appropriate. This will enable victims, again, most of whom are women, to have the opportunity to vindicate their rights. 4, end family status discrimination. Discrimination on the basis of the fact that you're a mother or that you have children while you work is unacceptable. Current New York law only prohibits family discrimination in the housing context and in credit. This is going to change that dramatically because we're going to prohibit employers from denying work or promotions to workers simply because they have children or they're a parent. This will make New York State the 5th state in the nation to protect against family status discrimination. Similarly, we want to stop housing discrimination for victims of domestic violence. Discrimination against victims of domestic violence. Victims are women, 85%. Under the current state law, victims aren't protected from discrimination in housing. And what we want to do, going to the next slide, is prevent landlords from discriminating against victims simply because they've been a victim of domestic violence. And that's a really important change. Six, we want to stop source of income discrimination. We talked about some facts earlier. Women head of households with children often account for 76% of the vouchers that are Section 8. Many landlords often refuse to rent to recipients of Section 8. Obviously, the recipient would have to prove that they're creditworthy and that they can pay the rent. It's not an attempt to alter that. However, landlords shouldn't be able to simply refuse somebody if they can meet all the other qualifications simply because they receive Section 8. This law would ensure that women who receive these vouchers, receive the vast majority of these vouchers, have the opportunity to rent housing that's suitable for them, and most often suitable for them and their children. Jumping ahead, we're going to protect victims of domestic violence by strengthening orders of protection laws. Many of you may recall last year we also did a law to enhance protections for domestic violence victims, and we need to continue to do that. Many victims face obstacles in securing protection from their abusers. And so one thing we're going to do is the bill proposes a program that will allow domestic violence victims in certain circumstances to seek orders of protection through an electronic means rather than having to appear in person. A court will, of course, oversee this to ensure that everybody's rights are protected, and that will be an important change. 8, we're going to strengthen our human trafficking laws. Under current state law, for human trafficking victims that are minors, coercion needs to be proved. And women who sometimes are charged with these offenses, or even kids, are who have been victimized and may be prostitutes, are charged. And we want to provide them with an affirmative defense that if they're a victim, they don't face the same consequences as the person responsible for them being a victim. So our act on 8 would remove the coercion requirement, be proven when sex trafficking victims are minors, and increases penalties for trafficking, aligning the law with statutory rape in other areas. And of course, it would create an affirmative defense. Now, many of you may know to have babies, you have to be pregnant, and we want to stop pregnancy discrimination. Some pregnancies can result in medical conditions, and we want employers to be required to go through the reasonable accommodation analysis. That doesn't mean they have to accommodate the person. However, it requires them to simply go through the process they have for many other things like disability or or religion, and do an analysis to see whether or not it would be an undue burden to accommodate the woman's request. So that's 9, stop pregnancy discrimination. And finally, 10, protect a woman's freedom of choice. Currently, New York State law's protections of freedom of choice are outdated and frankly don't align with the federal law standard outlined in Roe v. Wade 40 years ago and state practice. The Women's Equality Act would simply codify the federal law and which is really Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court case to protect a woman's right to choose. It ensures that New York's laws are consistent with the law of the land, Roe v. Wade. It's conforming to current state practice and Roe v. Wade. And that's the Women's Equality Act. New York State has always been the nation's leader, and it's time for us to lead again. The end. And now I'd like to ask Susie to speak.
Thank you. Under Governor Cuomo's leadership, the Women's Equality Agenda has been diligently working to bring women's groups from around the state and the country together for a common goal, to achieve full equality for women. We were brought together a short 6 months ago. Many of us didn't know each other and not worked together before. Some had. But we've built a historic coalition. We have 850 members of our coalition. In fact, I have the list, and I can't read it without a magnifying glass, even though it is 4 pages back to back. And it just shows the breadth and depth. It is business groups, religious groups, women's groups, human rights groups. Totally, we represent millions of people around this state. We've held 18 press conferences, 12 rallies statewide. We've called more than 50,000 women. We've had 3,500 TV ads on statewide, 100 radio ads in Long Island, New York City. We've sent mailers out. We've organized 10 lobby days. We're especially proud of our TV ad. We just hit 20,000 hits virally on YouTube, which, if you look at some of the other ads that have run in the state, I think we're close to a record on that. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and every method that we can. Today's the culmination of a lot of that's been going on. We have about 17 busloads coming from around the state, from Long Island to Buffalo and every place in between. Hundreds more by cars, 26 speakers, and everybody will lobby today. So the groups, after we have the rally, will go out, and we have 100 different lobby visits scheduled throughout the day. We have garnered support from across the state, and at this point, we simply can't be ignored. All this was achieved through unprecedented display of excitement over this plan. This has never been done in the state. We have found no place in the country that has put together this kind of coalition and this kind of effort. So we are thrilled. We are very proud to be here, be part of this historic moment. And I'd like to thank all the women in the room and men that have been part of it and have worked so diligently to get this done. Thank you.
Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Governor. The Women's Equality Act is truly a momentous moment. It addresses, as you've heard today, decades of discrimination in the workplace, in housing, in the home. It breaks down the kinds of barriers that have really put women in a disadvantage, even in this state. One of the aspects of the governor's 10-point agenda in this act is a proposal to protect a woman's freedom of choice. New York has an extraordinary history of being a leader, including in protecting a woman's right to choose, and we are tremendously appreciative that Governor Cuomo has made it a priority to continue that tradition at such a critical time. As the governor has said, it's very simple. The governor's plan will preserve a woman's right to make her own reproductive health decisions here in New York State. It is her body, it is her choice. He is simply codifying, as you've heard outlined today, the protections in the Supreme Court ruling that Sarah Weddington, our esteemed colleague, so eloquently argued 40 years ago, to ensure that a woman's right to choose is an affirmative right under our state law, regardless of what happens in other states, in Congress, or in the Supreme Court in the future. This in no way means an expansion of abortion rights. This one point in the governor's women's equality agenda is simple. We are ensuring that women will have tomorrow the same right to make choices about her health and her body as she has today under New York state law and federal law. Support for this is calls a clear question for New York. Are you pro-choice? Are you not? And that is the core message that we ask today of our legislators and of our colleagues. I'm so proud to have been part of this coalition. It really, truly has been an amazing experience. And really looking forward to seeing New York yet again be a trailblazer for helping women and their families and leading the nation for safer, healthier lives. And I'm very excited.
Thank you, Andrea. Well, today Governor Cuomo announces his groundbreaking Women's Equality Act. And this proposed legislation will address decades of injustice and bigotry. And of course, this bill will achieve equal pay, which is one of the reasons I'm speaking today, and dramatically shatter one of the last glass ceilings for women. This is an issue that time has come. Matter of fact, it is overdue. New York's current protections against wage disparity are simply inadequate, and they are antiquated. Women earn significantly less than men for the very same job. And this wage gap, which is large for women, is even more severe for African American and Latinas. The governor's legislation will amend the law by instituting triple damages and increasing civil fines. This will ensure that women receive the wages they are entitled to and have always deserved. These steps will encourage employers just to look more closely at their wage practices. Furthermore, the governor's agenda and this proposal will prohibit retaliation against workers who share their wage information. And this will really prevent disparities from going undetected, which is critical. In the past 2.5 years, Governor Cuomo has proven himself to be a true leader for progressive causes, and it's been our honor to work with you on this. We are confident that the governor will once again provide the guidance and bold leadership that we need to finally bridge the gender wage gap and bring equality to the women of the state of New York. Thank you so much, Governor. Turn back to Nyland.
Great. And now I'd like to introduce Brianna, who is going to talk about her experience as a victim.
Thank you, Mylon. Governor Cuomo, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. I'm here to tell my story because I want New York State to pass stronger laws so that in the future girls are not hurt like I was. I think of my 8-year-old sister and want to do everything I can to protect her. When I was 9 years old, I was kidnapped by my school janitor. He raped me and sold me to a pimp. From then on, my life was not my own. I lived under the control of a series of brutal pimps who exploited me for their own profit and sold me on places like Backpage.com to men who knew my age and bought sex because of it. I was kept in a room with no bathroom, in a house with no electricity or running water, and the door was locked from the outside. I was able to escape, but traumatized and vulnerable, I was quickly targeted by another pimp. Pimps are smart, and they know the little things to do to get control over a child. He took me out to dinner, took me shopping, and to get my nails done. He promised me the life that I wanted to lead: school, a loving home, and a family. He told me that I only needed to do one small thing for him in return. Quickly, I was again pulled into a life of violence and exploitation. I was beaten, I was raped, and there was no one there to save me. One time, from the room where he kept me, I saw my mom outside the window hanging up missing posters. I screamed, "Mom, I'm here," and my pimp came up behind me and pulled me by the hair and said, "You will never leave. Good luck trying." When I was 13 years old, the police finally came to get me, but I wasn't rescued as a missing child. I was arrested and placed in handcuffs as a prostitute. I was called prostitute even though I was a child, even though I was a trafficking victim. When I was freed from that life, you would think that everything would be better, but it wasn't. I was angry, I was traumatized, and I was scared. I didn't understand how the man who promised me a better future, who had been my protector, was also the person who victimized me. He told me that I couldn't exist without him, and I couldn't understand a world in which anything else was true. When the DA said I needed to testify against my trafficker, I didn't think I could do it. She told me I needed to be strong. She told me that I was a victim, but all I saw was the man who held the keys to my days, who decided whether I'd be raped, whether I'd be beaten, or whether I'd be fed. He was eventually convicted of kidnapping and will only serve about 4 years. This man who owned me as a slave, who sold me to child rapists, who profited from my body, deserves to be punished more harshly. We need to send a message to other people who want to exploit women and girls, men and boys, the way I was exploited, that New York State does not stand for this crime. This is why I support the Women's Equality Act, especially for the human trafficking portion. Thank you, Governor Cuomo, and members of the Women's Equality Act Coalition for standing up for girls like me and for taking a stand against human trafficking, modern-day slavery in New York State. Thank you.
Well, Brianna, thank you very much for sharing that story. We can all understand how it takes real courage for you to be here and tell that story, but you're here so that other people don't feel the same pain that you did, and we truly applaud it. Let's give Brianna another round of applause. And thank you all very much for taking the time to be here. It is an exciting day for us, listening to Susie Ballantyne talk about what this coalition has done and what this group has done is truly amazing. 850 groups all across the state. You represent a majority of New Yorkers, so it's been really a pleasure to work with you over these past few months and watch the extraordinary progress that you've made. The organization, the cohesion, the unity has really been admirable, so we thank you. It's also a pleasure to have Sarah Weddington here. Couldn't be a better person. Sarah is the person who was the winning attorney for Roe v. Wade and who actually argued. So pleasure and welcome to Albany. Pleasure to have you here, Sarah. Thank you. Let's give her a round of applause. And let's remember where we started with this venture. The venture really starts in the recognition of the problem rather than the definition of the resolution. To me, this was a king has no clothes type situation. We started in the state of the state with the simple recognition that there is a societal bias and discrimination against women. And it is pervasive, and it has been in existence for a long period of time. And if you believe, as we do, that you'll never solve a problem that you're unwilling to admit, let's begin by admitting the problem and recognizing the problem. And let's begin by standing up and saying there is a bias against women in society. And it is sweeping, and it is not just in one area, but it's in many areas. And it's been accepted for too long. So the first point was It exists, the bias exists, the discrimination exists, it is societal, and we're not going to allow it to exist anymore. Why the state of New York? Because the state of New York has had a long and proud history of being the first one to stand up on issues like this, on issues of inequality, and pointing it out and highlighting it and resolving it. That's why the state of New York. Then we had several months of phenomenal organizing activities by the coalition you see before you today. We have a 10-point women's equality agenda, and it is sweeping, and each and every one of those 10 points is vitally important. And there is no point that's more important than any other point. Pay equity is a major issue, and the glass ceiling is a major issue. Human trafficking, and Brianna's story is painful to listen to. It's shocking that something like that could go on today in this society with all our precautions, with all the attention, that you could have a basic violation of human rights today in New York. So every one of the 10 issues is important. The constant discrimination and the persistent discrimination against women in various fields, source of income discrimination, every one of the 10 points is important. I see it as almost a Bill of Rights, a statement of inequities for women. And again, it's about the recognition and the acknowledgement of the same. When it comes to the issue of choice, as we have said from the very beginning, the language will affirm a woman's right. There is no extension. The fear-mongering was just that. It's fear-mongering. There is a simplicity and a clarity to the choice language. You're pro-choice or you are not pro-choice. And it's okay to have a disagreement. This is a difficult issue. People have strong feelings on both sides, but clarity is important. And we affirm a woman's right to choose, and we affirm a woman's right to choose in Roe v. Wade in this great state of New York, and we want it codified in state law, and the Women's Equality Agenda would do that. So we have the 10 points. The language will go up today. We'll continue doing what we've been doing. We'll continue organizing. I think a vote on these 10 points is going to be protective and furthering of the women's agenda. I think it'll bring clarity and transparency to the people of the state of New York, because they have a right to know how their elected officials feel on each and every one of these 10 points. They have a right to know. These are all major issues, and the voters and the citizens of the state have a right to know how their elected officials stand. We are going to be in Seneca Falls tomorrow, which is so fitting to be talking about the women's agenda in Seneca Falls. And in many ways, you've honored that tradition of courage and strength and women who stand tall and women who lead. It's a pleasure to be a male in your company. Congratulations to all of you. Questions?
Governor, you said you didn't want to put this bill out until either if it was capable of passing or if it was clear that it wasn't going to pass. So is it the former or the latter here? In other words, do you have any kind of assurance from legislative leaders, specifically from Dean Skelos, that this bill will come to the floor?
We do not have any assurance, Casey, but the language of this bill, I believe this is a bill that can and should pass. There are no assurances. There've been, every conversation is basically has been basically the same thing that's been made, the same statements that have been made public. We're aware of the opposition, but I think by the language that is in this bill, this is a bill that can and should pass.
Given the opposition that has been raised on the abortion issue of this 10-point plan, are you willing to accept 9, 8, 7 items as opposed to all 10, or does it have to be all 10?
You know, this has been a decision basically of the collective. This has been a decision of the coalition from day one. This coalition was very helpful in crafting the 10 points, Ken. They're all important, and the coalition has been united in wanting all 10 to pass. Now, again, the language on the choice issue is different than what the opponents have suggested, right? Different than what the press has been writing, frankly, for the past several months, despite all our repeated efforts. There's going to be a bill that expands, extends. None of that was true. We said none of that was true. That's what the opposition needs, I believe, to foment more opposition and fear. The language does none of that. So I think it is language that can and should pass.
But Senator Skills' office has put out repeated statements basically saying that it's either going to be an extremist bill or unnecessary in terms of the abortion part of it because the law already protects it.
Well, unnecessary. Affirming a woman's right to choose in the state of New York is not unnecessary. But most of the talk has been about the extremists and the fear and the extending. I mean, go back and look at the stories that you guys wrote. None of that is accurate. So now when you see what the language actually says and none of the fears are there, this is very simple. Are you pro-choice or are you not pro-choice? That's the question. You're pro-choice or not. You support Roe v. Wade, which, by the way, is the law of the land, is the law of the state, or you don't support Roe v. Wade. So you can be pro-choice, you can be pro-life. Fine. I respect both. I've had the discussion with people on both sides, but people of the state have a right to know. I am pro-choice, and I believe the state law should reflect that.
Just so I'm clear from the first question on whether you need all 10 or there's no agreement, I know you said it's important to the coalition, they want all 10. Does that mean you would not accept an agreement that did not have the abortion language as part of it?
The coalition, and I'm part of the coalition, I'm here in the coalition. I'm only one vote of the coalition. I could get outvoted. Maybe I'd have some sway with Mylan, depends on the day. I think Mylan might go with me, depends on the issue. But the coalition has voted that they want all 10. Is that true, coalition?
Yes. What does the language say with regard to healthcare practitioners? Does it allow them to perform abortions?
The language says, notwithstanding any law to the contrary, New York protects a woman's right to obtain an abortion when the fetus is not viable or when necessary to protect a woman's life or health as determined by a licensed physician.
Does this remove, currently abortion is allowed as an exception under the penal law? Does this essentially remove abortion language from the penal law and place it in some other code?
Penal law remains. If you follow this law, obviously you're not subject to a penal law.
But this goes into public health law or somewhere else?
This is in what law? Public health law.
And the penal law language remains on the books?
You know the answer?
If you follow this proposed law, you couldn't be prosecuted criminally. So the penal law is repealed to the extent it's inconsistent with following this law, but the law remains on the books.
So the fact that you're leaving the penal law on the books would allow prosecution of perhaps non-licensed physicians? Am I understanding? I'm just wondering why you did
Yes. This way seemed to be completely a way to codify Roe v. Wade and ensure that the state practice that currently exists continues and align ourselves with federal law without expanding or extending in any way.
And Governor, you had previously, I think in your campaign materials and in your State of the State presentation, you would endorse the Reproductive Health Act, which is a bill that's been around the Capitol for several years now. And this seems to do less to affirm pro-choice elements than that bill. Can you talk about the shift from...
There was no shift. There were a number of reproductive... You said there was a bill that was the Reproductive Health Act bill. That's not accurate. There were a number of bills called the Reproductive Health Act. Number of senators, number of modifications, number of different versions. I said Reproductive Health Act, I mean codifying, protecting a woman's right to choose, not extending. There were none of the hot button fears that people were trying to foment. And this language does what we had been talking about for months.
Governor, excuse me, you think maybe the woman could ask a question since there's a lot of women?
Be careful, Mr. Fee. Be careful. The first person convicted by the Women's Equality Act, Zach Fink.
We're getting a lot of emails this morning from the Catholic Church. They're opposed to this bill. First of all, would you put them in the category of extremists, as you mentioned opponents were extremists, or not?
No, I don't think I said the opponents are extremists. I said the opposite. I said I understand and I respect the opinion of people who disagree with this bill. You can be pro-choice, you can be pro-life. This is a heartfelt issue for many people. I happen to be pro-choice. The law of the land, the law of the nation, is a pro-choice law, right? Roe v. Wade establishes a woman's rights. This codifies Roe v. Wade for the state of New York. Some people, Catholic Church is pro-life. I respect that. I understand that. They will disagree with this language, not because it is an extension, but because it affirms a right to abortion, and they oppose abortion. So a pro-life Catholic Church will oppose a law that affirms abortion because they oppose abortion.
Two questions that they brought up. They say that there's more abortions in New York State than any other state, and they're wondering why there isn't the state equivalent of the Hyde Amendment in this legislation.
Their point is they oppose abortions, and they think there are too many abortions. I understand that position. I disagree with it, but I understand it, and I respect it. This law affirms a law that they disagree with. See, think of it that way. There is a federal law that they disagree with. There is now a state law affirming a federal law. They disagree with the federal law. They're going to disagree with this law. I understand that, but it's not anything other than that, and I have total respect for the Catholic Church, and I have total respect for their position. I've spoken to them about it at length. I've also been informed that the Catholic Church supports 9 out of 10 of the provisions of the Women's Equality Act, which is pretty good. If we get 90% on most of the initiatives, I'd be very happy. So I understand the disagreement on one of the items, but I respect and appreciate the support on 9 out of 10. Let me ask my partners in the coalition if anyone would like to comment on any of the above. Okay, next question.
It appears as though you will need Republican votes.
Chastened Mr. Fink. Go ahead.
I'm over here.
I know, but I want to seize on the opportunity to rub it in a little.
It appears as though you will need Republican votes, but Republicans have expressed to us some concern about sticking their necks out on something like abortion because they feel like with marriage equality they did that and they weren't adequately protected. Your response to that?
I think there are some Republicans who are pro-choice Republicans. And if you are a pro-choice Republican, you would support this. If there are no pro-choice Republicans, then they will not support this. And we will find that out. I believe the coalition believes there are pro-choice Republicans. Is that fair?
Have you identified those folks, Governor, or what is your progress in identifying Republican support?
Well, there have been a number of conversations that have been ongoing, basically among members of the coalition.
Some of the criticism that we're hearing from Republicans, though, who do not support this, is that they feel there's a disconnect between you pushing this agenda now while not also calling for Assembly Speaker Silver to step down over the Lopez scandal. What do you make of that criticism?
I dismiss it.
Governor, if this bill is the same that you've been talking about for months and opposition has created misinterpretation of this or false renditions of this. And if you haven't really changed your mind, why didn't you release the bill months ago?
Because we were working to get language that the entire coalition supported, and you have different voices along the spectrum here, and language that could pass both houses of the legislature. So you need a paragraph that is supported unanimously by the coalition and can be passed by Democrats and Republicans in the Assembly and the Senate.
How long did that take?
As long as this has been going on.
So like today, you came up with that, the bill?
It passed several days. Are they on all 10 or on?
On the abortion element.
Was resolved.
You haven't changed your view on it since you introduced it.
Well, it's been an ongoing issue. Two things. One, if you go back and look at the op-ed that Mylan Dennerstein wrote as counsel several months back, you'll see it says exactly about the legislation what we said it was going to say. Second, it then had to be crafted into a paragraph that the Assembly would support, a paragraph that we believe the Senate might support, and a paragraph that the coalition would all sign on to. Crafting that paragraph took the past several months.
Jeff Klein and the IDC have turned their ire kind of on their fellow Democrats, noting that there aren't 32 votes among Democrats for this bill, now that it is a bill. Is that a sufficient answer to you, or do they need to apply more pressure to their coalition partners in the Republican conference to get this out?
I think, Casey, and I'll ask the coalition members to comment on this, this is not a new conversation. This conversation has been going on for many, many years. And many of the members of the Senate have said to members of this coalition that they are pro-choice. There are people in the Senate who say to the people in their district that they are pro-choice. Now, the conversation has always gotten complicated with a number of issues of late-term abortion, parental control, etc. This is a very simple discussion. On this language, you're either pro-choice or you're not. And I believe this language will now reconcile that discussion. And the vote will be simple. If you are a pro-choice person, you will support this. If you are pro-life, you could not support this language. But it is that binary, in my opinion.
But Jeff Klein has handed veto power over whether or not this bill will get to the floor to Dean Skelos. Is that sufficient?
Meaning what is that sufficient?
In other words, are you going to be satisfied with the majority coalition if its structure prevents this bill from getting to the floor of the Senate?
Well, what that would be saying is there are no Republicans who are pro-choice.
Well, no. What it would mean is Dean Skelos has veto power over it getting to the floor.
Well, they both have veto power, right? The way the Senate works is you need Senator Klein and Senator Skelos to agree to put something on the floor, or one prevails upon the other. And that's a political decision that they're going to have to make. But why don't we ask members of the coalition who've been having conversations with this? Tracy, do you want to start?
This has always been a bipartisan issue in the state of New York, access to women's reproductive health care. And we recognize that today it's still supported by bipartisan support on both sides of the aisle. It will not be okay for those members in leadership in any party to stand in the way of the 10 million women in the state of New York from seeing a piece of legislation that really affects every part of our life to equally participate in our economy to be left on the table in this legislative session. This is the history of our state, this is the legacy of our state, and this is the 2013 version of leadership in this nation. This is a historic piece of legislation at a historic time in our country that New York State is presenting, and it will have bipartisan support.
Governor, a question
Excuse
for
me
you.
one second, Jesse. Andrea Miller, would you like to make a
I think, Governor, you and my colleague said it very well. We believe that this has always been an issue that crosses all parties and is supported by the vast majority of New Yorkers, regardless of their party. That has been clear for decades. New York originally led the way thanks to incredibly courageous Republican leadership in this state, and we believe that there are pro-choice Republicans, pro-choice members of the IDC, and certainly a very strong conference on the Democratic side of the aisle. So we're eager to see this come forward. We appreciate that everyone has had incredibly deep and thoughtful conversations with us about these issues, and we look forward to seeing history being made, and we think that everyone is going to want to be a part of making history because we need that. And the women of New York and families of New York need that, especially this session.
Any other comments, Susie? Oh, please.
I just want to step back to the comment or the question about what it's taken so much time and, what we've been doing for the past couple of months. And I guess I just really feel the need to stress that there are 9 other parts of this. And for the women who are facing housing issues and safety issues and workplace issues, those issues are just as important to them. And so I really hope that as we go through today and through the next couple of weeks that we make sure that we look at all 10.
Well said.
On that point then, and I know I asked this before, but are you willing to sacrifice, and I know it's hard to say on a day you're introducing the bill you're willing to sacrifice, but are you willing to sacrifice the ability to get certain things done, whether it's human trafficking, whether it's employment discrimination, for an issue that critics say is already on the books?
We don't believe that you have to give up any of the 10. We believe all 10 are important, and we don't believe that you have to give up any of the 10. All 10 are vital.
Governor, you said that the Catholic Church has said that they support 9 out of 10. But are you confident that Republicans support the other 9, taking the abortion piece out? I mean, hey, equity legislation has been unsuccessful in the past. There have been some concerns raised about making changes to the workplace in terms of a burden on employers when they're already dealing with tax burdens and whatnot. I mean, what is your sense of the support for the other 9?
I think they will support the other 9. Or they can say we're against pay equity. We don't believe women should get paid as much as men. They can say that.
I mean, are you bracing yourself for a fight on the other pieces as well as the fight that's already been going on with the abortion piece?
I'm not bracing for a fight. I'm looking for amicable resolutions wherever possible. I'm not in a fighting mode. I'm too tired to brace, so. Yes.
Might have been largely talking about 10, but we've been working on 1 through 10, aggressively, comprehensively, regularly.
Yeah, see, that's the other thing. This has been an ongoing effort for months, and within the coalition, different groups tend to focus on different issues, and they have been working on these issues for months, talking about this language with legislators. So in many ways, there's no surprises here. We're confident that a lot of work has been done. We're confident on the position on these issues, and they are all vitally important. Donna, did you want to make a point?
Yeah, I don't spend that much time in Albany. I come here from time to time, and maybe that makes it harder for me in Albany, but it gives me a certain perspective. You're talking about the reproductive rights component of this act as the most controversial. Well, this piece of the act has 80% approval across all demographics, across both parties, across all religions, all over the state. So it's not controversial, and it shouldn't be controversial in the state legislature, and it is not controversial at all for the women's organizations, for the civil rights organizations, for the labor organizations who are assembled here today, because a woman is a whole person. We have jobs, we have families, we need housing, we get pregnant sometimes, and it's all our rights that need to be protected.
See, I don't have to brace for a fight because I have Donna Lieberman on my side. I wish I had this coalition on every issue. make my job a lot easier. There is, just to put an exclamation point, I don't know if I could put an exclamation point in Donna's point, but of the 10, the choice issue, as you point out, probably in some ways, as it's affirming a current federal right, it could be argued is the least controversial. Many of the other points, as Jessica mentioned, pay equity, they have refused to pass in the past. And that is a controversial point. And if we pass pay equity, there will be a law in place that didn't exist. There'll be rights that didn't exist. The choice is really affirming a right that does currently exist.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Do you think the
Very good, Nick. You learned from the think precedent.
Do you think the gun control issue earlier in the session complicates this vote at all, with some Republicans who did vote for that, angered some of the conservatives in their voting base, and so they're worried about the backlash of another vote that would alienate some of their voters?
Jessica, I think short answer is no. I don't think this is a difficult. I don't think this is difficult if you are pro-choice. See, it's not a bill that extends. It's not a bill that takes abortion to a level that would be difficult to explain. It affirms the current right. And if you are pro-choice, no, it's a very simple statement if you're pro-choice. If you are pro-life, you will oppose it. And it's that clear to me. I think the way it's written is very simple. It is very simple. This is not the normal piece of legislation with nuances and caveats. This is very simple. And it's binary, and it's choice A or choice B. You are pro-choice or you are pro-life. And again, everyone has their own opinion, but it's that simple.
Governor, are you not promising then not to break off the abortion case?
Our position is, I'm part of this coalition, our position is we want all 10, we need all 10, and it's unnecessary.
So is that a no that you're not promising now to break off?
Promise, I don't promise. I don't make promises to you, and we don't promise to each other. That's our position.
Spokesman yesterday indicated that this is a litmus test for both parties. I'm just wondering if you could unpack that a little bit. What does that mean exactly, and does that suggest a suggestion that this has election year implications as well?
As I said before, as it is simply written, and I think very simple to understand, that provision will ask people, are you pro-choice, or are you not pro-choice? Period. And, you can have your position, and I'm sure everybody respects your position, but that's an important position on an important issue to women. And people have a right to know, Nick.
Is there room for lack of a better term, pro-life or Democrats who are against abortion rights in the Democratic Party?
Yes. You can be a pro-life Democrat. You can be a pro-choice Republican. I think you can.
Governor, how do you reconcile pushing for a zero tolerance on sexual harassment and having no opinion on whether or not the Assembly Speaker should remain in office?
Vito Lopez was accused of sexual harassment, and I made my opinion very clear and very strong on that situation. Who should be the Speaker of the Assembly is a political decision that I leave to the Assembly. I'm in the executive, I'm the governor. They pick their own leader, and they pick their speaker. And they're grown-ups and they're adults, and it's inappropriate for a governor to meddle in who should be the speaker or the leader of the Assembly. They're two wholly different things.
How is that different than an employer, which you can argue as speaker, he is the top boss? How is that different than an employer not being criticized for not taking sexual harassment seriously?
They're totally different, Ken. We're saying we're saying we want to have legal rights and have legal rights for victims of sexual harassment. That's totally different than a political decision on who the Speaker of the Assembly is and is it appropriate for the Governor of the State of New York to get involved in it.
Well, wasn't the decision to call for Vito Lopez to resign or be expelled also a political question?
No. No, I don't think so. Not for me. I mean, it was not up to me, right? That was just my opinion.
Nor is the leadership of the Assembly your decision to make.
No, but I think it would be inappropriate for me to be suggesting to the Assembly who they should elect, which is what you're asking me to do. I should say to the Assemblyman, this is what I think you should do. I think that would be inappropriate.
Members of the coalition, is there any feeling on that regarding this? Is there a contradiction in terms of a zero tolerance on sexual harassment and Speaker Silver still remaining Speaker of the Assembly?
Right.
Very good, Christine. I love this coalition approach, I'll tell you the truth. How about we do a coalition on the budget? Coalition on tax-free zones. Where are we on tax-free zones? Can we keep the same coalition for tax-free zones? How about casinos? It's fleeting. All right, let me thank the coalition very much. Congratulations to everyone today.